I think outshine a traditional stick frame is that, we have very little thermal bridging in our walls. Because of our bays being 8 foot on center, we just have these large expanses for insulation. We don't have to worry about, gaps. So.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast, our regular discussion with building industry professionals. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. I'm joined by Kyle Stumpenhorst, founder of Rural Renovators, a post-frame building company in Franklin Grove, Illinois. You can find the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast and the original Fine Homebuilding podcast at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. You can leave feedback and ask questions there too. Kyle, thank you so much for joining me. It is a pleasure to talk to you.
Dude, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
So, you and I were introduced via email probably a year or so ago, and as you might imagine, the world is a lot different since then. Are you healthy? Is everyone okay at your house? And how's that going?
You know what? It's been pretty good. My wife is in education. She's a principal, so I think she's had a lot more of a struggle with it all than I have, being a contractor and a business owner that's usually by themselves,
Sure. And how's she? Is she able to go to work now, or is she still working from home?
Yeah, I'm told that her school district is the largest school district in the state of Illinois that's actually doing a hybrid model, not complete remote learning. So they're doing basically every other day.
That's really interesting. And how about you? How's your work life changed, or has it?
You know what? I never missed a day for any of the pandemic stuff. I've had issues with materials. I've had lead times just grow and grow and grow. And that's put a damper on my year for sure, but there's always stuff to do. So it just means you got to be creative.
So I'm guessing you're having difficulty getting lumber specifically. Is that correct?
You know what? Actually, no. Lumber, even though, that's the big talk, I've still had the availability. I can still get it. It costs me an arm and a leg. I've had clients that have basically said, we're going to go ahead and let's watch it over the winter. And if weather's good and the prices come back down, we'll move forward. But I've had 2 clients out of my next 3 jobs push off and say, let's just hold off a second. And I gotta be honest, I'm actually a little thankful, because it has been a long, hard year, and I'm hoping it does slow a little bit through the winter.
To get caught up, right?
Yeah. But other than lumber, it's been windows have been slow, decking, like composite decking. But mainly windows have been my big pain, actually.
Interesting. Have the window manufacturers given you any explanation why it's a problem?
No, I've just said, that's crazy. You told me 4 weeks. Now it's 10 weeks. Now it's 12 weeks. And they're like, we're doing the best we can. So what do you do?
Wow. I'm going to have a window person on the show, right?
No, I'm told that it's getting better. I ordered these windows kind of early summer, and it just took forever to get them, good condition, everything came right. So I can't complain about that, but lead times were probably the biggest hurdle for me this building season.
Interesting. So your company specializes in post-frame buildings. Can you please tell our listeners how a post-frame building is constructed and how it's different from like a light frame construction? And what do you think the advantages of this building style are?
Sure. So I think I'd start by saying the traditional post frame, the pole barn, that's what people usually, think about. That's your agricultural building. It's a hay barn. It's just post in the ground.
It's your tractor shed, right?
Yeah. Tractor shed, hay storage. As time has gone on, farmers have done better. There's been years where they did really good, and they wanted really nice buildings, and they wanted buildings that were going to last, because it was becoming a generational thing. It wasn't just, I want a 30-year building. I want something that's going to last my lifetime, maybe my kids, whatever. And so post frame, is very basic in nature. You've got posts that bear the weight of the truss, and those are sitting on some sort of a footing. Traditionally they're in the ground, whatever the frost line is around me, things go 4 feet in the ground. They're sitting on a little, concrete footing down there. So it has some, bearing spread weight on it, but very basic. And that's where I started. I was building just post frames. I put posts in the ground on some concrete, and we were building a lot of machinery buildings for farmers, because farmers were doing really good probably 7-8 years ago. I don't know, when everybody else was in recession and the housing market was bad, farmers were doing pretty good. And so that's when I transitioned into post frame, and a post frame has changed a ton in the last 7, 8 years. And I feel like I've been very fortunate to be on kind of the front end of that and really trying to push that because I do like it and making things more high end residential. And I'll be honest, Patrick, I've done one farm building in the last 2 years, and I do post frame all the time. So when people say you just build in barns for farmers or whatever, which is the typical response, it's actually a lot of residential accessory buildings. People want to store all their toys, they want to live in them. Uh,
Hmm.
they just want a cool place for their family to hang out.
And what are the advantages of the building? Like traditionally, it was meant to be very inexpensive storage, right? These were for animals or machinery or hay, not for people.
Right.
So why do people want these buildings for people now?
So I think the biggest thing is there's still an efficiency advantage. Most people have a budget, right? So they're going to spend 300,000, 400,000 on whatever their project is, regardless. If you go stick frame, the traditional, stick frame, you're probably not going to get as much for that money as if we were going to do a post frame. A lot of people that come to me with the post frame in mind, they already have a very simplistic idea in their head, right? They don't need a ton of different roof lines. They don't want a bunch of different angles out this way and that way. They want something efficient. And that's where post frame really shines because, you know, it's just straightforward. And I've done an 84-foot wide clear span wood. Um, you're just not seeing that on a traditional stick frame. I mean, they're just not made to support that kind of a bearing weight on the walls. And with post frame, everything when the way we build, everything is supported directly to a footing. We don't put any wood in the ground, so everything is on concrete, either a concrete pier, a concrete wall, and yeah, clients are just seeing this as a great opportunity to get more for their money because not everybody really they realize they don't need fancy. They want a lot of good function.
And who are the folks that are your clients? Are they folks who could build any kind of building they want, or are they trying to maximize their dollar because they're working folk like the rest of us?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think Facebook has been good about kind of pushing this whole barn dominium or this, some people call it a shouse, which is like a house inside of their shop. Um, it's very utility. I mean, you can get everything you want. I mean, this building that we're doing now, it's got 4,000 plus square foot, right? In a very simplistic shell, but we've just done a lot of extra things to it to make it not look so industrial or commercial. And the clients are wanting something to look really good, but they're also seeing that, man, I can do a ton with this style for the cost. So everybody's coming at you with cost savings in mind. You'd never get a client. I don't ever get a client anyway that says, I got millions, do whatever you want. That would be amazing. I'm always waiting for that phone call, but it's always, I got a budget, but I like your work. What can we do to make the most of it?
So, what kind of projects are your sweet spot? Like, how big are these buildings, and do you have a lot of site work to do? Is that vary? And I know that's a lot of questions, but
Right.
do your best.
I think our sweet spot lately has been that like 40 by 64, that it's a very good dimension. It gives clients enough room to do just about anything most people want to do. They're not storing semis in there. They can fit their RV, they can have shop room, they can have a little bar in the corner for their man cave, and they can store all their stuff. All of us here in America probably have way too much stuff. We just keep buying stuff and our garages are full and we can't park our cars. And those are my clients. They have been waiting 20 years. Their kids are grown up, and the husband, usually because it's a guy, just wants a place for his own. And the wife is like, get your stuff out of my garage. I want to store my car in there.
That's great. So, I happen to know this answer to this question, but I'm going to let you answer. So, it's you and Greg, right? Do you have any other employees?
No, that's it. I did have a third guy for the last probably 4 years, and he moved away with his family. He was a younger kid, 20, I think he just turned 21. Um, and honestly, three is probably the sweet number, and I'll probably get back to three people. But I've just been so busy in very detailed projects currently that I knew it wouldn't be probably the right move to hire and train. I wanted to get through these, find some good projects that are basic, and get them started there before I just put them right in. And, you know, it's tough because I'm a content creator too, Patrick. So I'm trying to create content, trying to share stuff. And
We'll
it's
talk
hard.
about that later because
Yeah.
your content is very good. So are you the bookkeeper too, in addition to being content creator and carpenter,
Yeah.
Kyle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My wife is mad at me. She wishes I would just hire, and I'm there. I'm about ready to do that because yes, it's getting to be too much with the added social media stuff.
Sure.
Um, I'm very type A, so I like to just do stuff myself. But I'm getting over it. The older I get, the better I'm getting.
I was watching you and Greg, and it's clear he's younger than you because you guys were plumbing this very tall wall in this building you're working on currently. And this was probably months ago for you, right? And you said, "I don't see any other way we could do this without this plate level. Like, can you imagine plumbing this wall with a 4-foot level?" And he's like, "Well," and you were like, "Well, we could use a plumb bob." And you had to explain it to him because he didn't know what it was, right? And he said that sounds miserable, and he's right.
Yeah, yeah, and Greg is he's 27, so he's 10 years younger than me. I actually brought him on when he was 18. He just turned 18, never worked in any other field other than helping some farmers around, doing miscellaneous stuff. And so I was fortunate to find a guy like him who is a good person, a good hard worker, who listens and didn't know anything else. And whether or not that's good to only know what I know. I understand it's great to have, opposing views and maybe more
Sure.
information, but we work seamlessly because he only knows my way. And that works well for me because I am type A.
I can tell you guys work very well together. You have to talk very little.
Yeah,
I can tell when a crew is running on all cylinders when they don't have to talk much. Everyone knows their job, right?
right.
So interestingly, you have a degree in computer science. What made you not want to do that for a living, and how were you introduced to the construction business?
I mean, it's crazy because I think many times when I'm outside working in my job now, how miserable it would be to be back in an office because I did it. It only took me, I think, about 18 months. And the commute to work, I had a great job. I really did. A great business that I was working for. But I just knew it was never going to really satisfy me. It wasn't going to bring me like fulfillment. And I knew that I was always going to work harder than probably I would be appreciated by somebody else because, it wasn't all about Kyle. It was about the business as a whole. And by transitioning to a entrepreneur, by starting a business, I knew that I could basically the sky was the limit. I could find, as much success as I was willing to put in the time. And at the time that I was having these feelings, I just happened to have an opportunity to purchase an old home. I think it was built in 1890 from my father-in-law, who was a farmer, and it was just a family farmhouse. And my dad, who introduced me to the trades, he was the one that really got me into using my hands.
So what
Uh,
did he do for a living, Kyle?
well, he was a computer guy too. So he always, and that's why I followed his footsteps. But on the side, his side hustle was always remodeling, doing side projects for other friends and stuff. And then I don't think I ever grew up in a house that was done. When it was done, we sold it and we just would upgrade. That was how I grew up. So I always knew remodeling what it was. And I always enjoyed doing that with my dad. And so when I got this house opportunity, I bought it. I was remodeling it while we were preparing to get married, me and my wife, because she was still in college. I just graduated. And I just fell in love with it, man. It was like every day I'd go out there, I'd spend 4 hours after work, 5 hours, and I would have an accomplishment. It would be like, this was what I did. And one thing led to another. People found out that I was doing that on the side. They said, "Hey, you want to do a deck for me? I got to do this." And I did it. And then one day I told my wife while we were laying in bed, and my first son was, not born yet, but he was coming, that I was quitting my job, and she kind of thought I was ridiculous.
I'm
But
sure she was worried, right?
yep, yep, yep. But the best decision I ever made.
That's really cool. So how long ago was that?
That was in '07. So
Oh my God. And then the economy tanked. What happened then?
yeah, isn't that funny? Because that's what most people say. They're like, you started your business in construction during the tank of the economy. And honestly, I figured that is actually what kept me or allowed me to grow because I was new, I was hungry, I returned all my phone calls, I gave people fair prices, and I was in a small community, so everybody that was calling me, they called me because they knew me. They knew I was a good person. They knew that I was a hard worker, and I got that opportunity. And so once things picked up, you know, I built a name for myself at that point.
So were there other people when you were growing up, except besides your dad, who influenced you to pursue a career building?
Um, I don't think during, my childhood I ever had even the smallest notion that I would be a carpenter. I mean, I was valedictorian in my class. I loved computers. I went to college. I thought genuinely I was going to have some big paying job, working in the city and work my way up the ranks. Like that's just what I was told, was going to happen.
So how did you learn post frame building then? Like where did that come from?
A lot of times I would take on projects that I knew nothing about. And to be honest, I'm fairly confident enough that I can figure it out. I mean, if somebody can do it, why can't I? It was my mentality. And I failed a lot of times, don't get me wrong. But I was fortunate enough to have my wife's grandpa call me one day and say, "Hey, I need a garage and I want it to be post frame. And it's fairly small. You ever done it?" And I said, "No, but I'll give it a go." And I had a buddy I grew up with who worked for another company. And I said, "Hey, you want to come help me on the weekends? Show me how to do this." And he's like, "Yeah, that's great." And yeah, I did my first one. And believe it or not, I think that was in like the spring of, I think it was like the spring of 12 or 13. And by fall, I had, like three monster farm shops, like 72 by 144, 60 by 120, which that's a lot. And it just never stopped. And I just went 100% post frame.
Did you, was it immediately appealing to you? What made you like it?
Yeah, I love being outside. I'm an outside guy.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the part of being in a server room, doing IT work. I just couldn't handle the windows and just being outside every day, being able to show up to the job site, specifically post frame. There's a huge pile of lumber, right? And very, very often, doesn't matter what the size is, in less than a week, that pile is a structure. And so the gratification that comes from like all that hard work is very instant. And even though I know delayed gratification is better, instant gratification is still
It's pretty good.
It's still really good. And so, I love framing. I love working with, big wood and using my hands and just everything about it, man. It was just great.
So I was watching a number of your videos today, and they're very well produced. They're interesting, and I swear your delivery is like someone who's been doing this for a long time. But what I've observed today is the stuff you're lifting is freaking huge. By residential standards, it's immense. Do you have equipment and stuff that helps you move that around?
Yeah, that was one of my first things was I bought a skid loader. And skid loader will never have a sore back in the morning. Like it's never going to be sore. So
You have a Kubota track
yep.
skid steer loader, and this is the original machine you bought, or this is a
This is a replacement. I bought a small machine and it did, I had a small budget. I didn't have much money.
Yeah.
I was starting out. And then I think I bought that machine I think it was 2014. I bought the Kubota. Every job it's used multiple times. Every day it's used. And yeah, machinery is, I think, the key to a post framer's success. I've got a mega deck scissor lift. So it's not.
We should tell folks what that is. It's a scissor lift on steroids. How big is the platform you stand on?
8 foot by 20 foot.
Yeah, it's enormous.
And what's amazing is, in the morning we'll load up materials, and no joke, we'll do an entire roof and all the materials, everything we need is right there. We can do all the steel for the roof, all the trims, the soffit, the fascia, and I never climb a ladder. Which, if we can be honest, ladders are not safe. Ladders are tiring when you're going up and down them. And so
you can't carry big things.
No, you can only carry one thing at a time. You're up, down, up, down, up, down. So yeah, it's just scissor lifts are the godsend when it comes to a post frame.
So what I observed about that, Kyle, is you must work in pretty flat terrain, because that would never work like in any job site I have ever been on, right? Like in New England or Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I worked out in New York one time, and It was eye-opening. It was like, wow, I couldn't imagine having to dig through this shale stone, and I couldn't imagine having to work on the ledges of these, you know, uh, just the sheer drop-offs on the side of the sites. The good thing is I've learned over time that not all of my sites are level, but
Hmm.
I've gotten to where I tell the customer, this is just the requirement. You need to build the pad. It needs to be 14 foot past the building, and that way I can operate safely, efficiently, and that's what your bid's based on. And so most people, man, they want you to do the best job possible, so they make that happen.
Yeah, and it's frankly the only way I could see you making the size structures that you are building, and with any efficiency. Um, when you build a post frame building that will be conditioned, what are the typical wall and roof and uh, I guess they're all slabs? Is that correct?
Yeah, mostly slabs. We have done some basements. We've done walkout basements. We've done just regular residential basements inside, the post frames. Typically, and this is where I think a post frame really does, um, I think, outshine a traditional stick frame. Is that we have very little thermal bridging in our walls because of our bays being 8 foot on center. We just have these large expanses for insulation. We don't have to worry about gaps. We don't have to do spray foam to seal as well as like a stick frame, because we we just don't have all those nooks and crannies everywhere that are hard to insulate with a fiberglass. So uh, most of our structures, most of them, if they're going to be a shop, a storage building, even like a man cave, they're going to get a fiberglass bat in the wall. We have either a 6 or 8 inch post, so we can put R30 in the wall if we want to. Everything gets wrapped on the exterior so that it's airtight, and uh, we've started now to kind of try to bring spray foam into the mix. Obviously, cost is usually, like I said, people are looking at this project as a way to be cost effective, not just blow money. And so it's usually a battle of, okay, what kind of money are you looking, or how are you planning on heating this? And do we need to spray foam it? Because in our climate, we're mainly heat, Patrick, because most of the time I have a 60 by 88, which is a large shop, and I don't have air conditioning in it. I've never seen my shop over 77. That's the highest I've ever seen it. And so they stay extremely cool during the summer, which, because you got so much ground temperature, I think just,
Yeah, and they're low mass, right? It's
yeah.
the envelope is very low mass.
Yep, yep. And other than your occasional door opening, which doesn't circulate a whole lot, they're very airtight. If anything, sometimes I worry about how tight they are because people aren't going to be putting air exchangers and stuff in their sheds. And so my conversation to most clients after we build is like, listen, this is going to be tight. If you notice moisture, I think you should always keep a dehumidifier in the structure because they're usually pretty dark in a sense because it's not just all windows and they're not
Hmm.
opening the windows and doors all the time. They're a very tight building. Most people use like radiant floor heat um, to heat the structures because it's pretty efficient. It's comfortable if you're working on the ground doing machinery or something like that, or even in homes. Most people are doing radiant slabs, and then they're doing an air exchanger with a air conditioning unit or something just for supplemental cold during the summer months. But very, very cost effective to heat and cool our structures.
And the like, how do you hide ductwork in a post frame building? That seems like a challenge.
Well, like I said, most of the time, all heating is done with
The floor.
or like a radiant tube heater, if you're familiar
Hmm.
with those. Super efficient. That's what I went with in my shop because I'm able to keep my shop for about $500 a winter. I can keep my shop at like 60, 65 with a tube heater, and it's very comfortable. It just heats all the objects. It's great. So no duct work, just one pipe running, the length of the building up somewhere by the ceiling. When we get into like residential style buildings where they're doing air conditioning, they'll make it. They'll put it into the walls. They'll do like a mini split or something like that too, and that usually works really well because it doesn't take a whole lot to keep the humidity out. Really, that's all they need to do for AC.
You mentioned that the first building you built was for your father-in-law. Is that correct?
My wife's grandpa.
Your wife's grandpa, and you put the post right in the ground, right? Is
Yep.
pole buildings are often builders, that's how they're described. But
Mhm.
I know the industry has made some improvements in the construction methods. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that was always the weak link, is the post would rot, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think the biggest hurdle was a lot of banks wouldn't loan people the amount of money they were wanting to build these structures if they wanted a barn dominium or a house. And I've been using a brand of bracket which we use to secure our post to concrete from Midwest Permacolumn, and I think just this last year, and I could be totally wrong. I don't know if it was an ICC code or what it was, but it was a foundation code that they finally got that allowed banks to look at this foundation system as a post frame and still loan it out. So it was a big deal because a
All of
lot
a
of
sudden now you can get a lot of money for building one of these.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, and it was never able to be done. Anytime customers come to me, it was all cash. They weren't
Yeah.
they weren't going through loans, and now people can do that, and we're seeing a big influx in. Um, I think probably half of my job bids that are coming in are people that want houses. They want post frame houses. They love the low maintenance on the exterior. They love that modern farmhouse look they can get with just simplistic, design.
Mhm.
And the technology of the post frame post in general, just that whole structure from the foundation up to the truss has just changed immensely. We're not setting trusses on the side of a pole and nailing it to the pole. We've got laminated columns with a center notch, so the truss sits inside the column, and it's a great.
We should tell folks about that because I found that very interesting and I saw it in your videos today. So you get from a factory what are 3-ply laminations
Right.
of the posts,
Yep.
and at the top, the center lamination is missing, so you can lower put the truss in this connection, and it looks very robust because you nail through the sides of the outer laminations and capture that truss in there. I presume that would have great uplift, and as I recall, you put either bolts or structural screws also to
Right.
make that stronger.
Right. And we actually, by doing that, it used to be guys would either bolt a truss to the side of a pole, which we both know is not the strongest way to do it because it's just, the bearing on those bolts, or they would run a header across the top of all of your posts, and they would just set a truss on top of that header and, like a traditional stick frame, and then use some sort of a, well, I'll be
Strap or whatever.
actually, a lot of guys would, and they would just toenail it down, and that's why these post frames were blown away. But with our method, we go with a enlarged heel, so we've got a 15.5-inch heel, which gives us not only more bearing out there, it gives us a side to side, like a structural advantage also for wind loading, and it gives us a thermal advantage also because now we've got an area for our blown in insulation in our attic space to fully encapsulate that wall cavity and not be reduced out by the soffit, which is what is happening to a lot of traditional post frames with like 5-inch heels, just sitting on a header.
And in the ground, you have a concrete piling, or what's going on there?
Yeah. So in the ground, what we're doing is we're digging our traditional footing, which most of our stuff is about 18-inch holes, and they're 48 inches deep. Maybe sometimes a little deeper. It depends on how much site work has been done, and if we want to get a little deeper into virgin ground. But instead of any backfill, we completely fill. We use a sonotube and we fill that whole thing up, and and then we have a wet set bracket from Midwest Permacolumn, which traditionally was used as a repair mechanism. So if you had a rotted post, you'd cut it flush, you'd dig alongside of it, and then you'd mount this bracket to it that had rebar that went down into the hole, and you'd pour it with concrete. Well, we looked at that, and it was like, well, if it's strong enough, and we talked to the company, they gave us the values, and it was like, why don't we just do it as new?
Build with these.
Yeah, why don't we do this as new construction? We'll set our bracket. And what it allowed us to do was not deal with when you set a pole in the ground that's been dug open and it doesn't matter, you have to fill back to it, right? You don't really want to encapsulate a post in concrete because it's going to rot really quick then. So all that backfill is loose. It's really hard to compact backfill no matter what. So we noticed back when I started, your building would move. It wouldn't always, you'd set that post on a string line, you'd backfill it, and maybe a little wind would come out and it would push that pole one way or the other. Now, when we move to these concrete piers with this bracket, we set it all either with a laser or a string line, depending on the wind conditions. and that bracket goes nowhere. It's virgin ground around it. It's encased in concrete, and it has a greater shear value than actual wood in the ground. And it gives us better uplift because it's not going to pull that pier out probably before it snaps. And all those tests have now been finally completed, and I think they went through the University of Wisconsin. I'm not sure where it was done, but now we have those numbers. And it used to be we just thought we were doing something good, and now we have the kind of proof to back up that this is a great foundation system.
So these brackets, we should tell folks, are U-shaped, right? They're steel. They look like pretty
Quarter-inch steel.
Quarter-inch steel. And you put a through bolt from the two sides through the post and for the connection to the ground.
Right, two of them, one in the top, one in the bottom. They're about 18 inches out of the ground is where they stick, or out of the pier. So depending on the size of column, they get beefier. They get bigger, they get taller. So it all just depends.
I was pretty freaking impressed, man, to see you drilling holes from one side to the other without ever missing today.
Yeah.
That was so most of us would drill from both sides to the center, but I'm sure that takes longer.
Yeah. Efficiency. It's all about efficiency.
You didn't miss, man. That was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So what is the best thing about being a post frame builder, and what are the challenges?
So I think the best thing about being post frame, I mean, if we've all been in the construction trades that are listening, we know that when you're working in someone's kitchen, bathroom, you're in their house, right? You're dealing with the mess you need to deal with, and you need to always be conscious of the fact that you're in someone's home. With post frame, I get to show up at a site. I got a pile of materials and a plan, and usually no customer. I mean, it's maybe at the end of the day they're there, but I get to just work my magic, do my thing, be outside and use machinery, build these large structures. It's like a kid. I get to be a kid again with like big machinery and bigger Lego blocks.
So what are the challenges? What's the hard part?
I think the hardest part I'm learning as I get older is that it's a very it's a very physical game. And I know that there's going to be a point where shoulders, wrist, elbows, whatever is going to probably be what takes me out of doing it every day. And
you drive a lot of nails for a carpenter today.
Yeah.
You physically are pounding nails. I was observing that.
Yeah. And I think that people are always confused by that, but they always need to understand that a post frame connection are few and far between. So with a stick frame, you can put tons of nails in your sheathing. You've got lots of studs. It doesn't take the same type of connection. And yes, they make guns that drive really large fasteners. I have a couple of them, but there's a lot of connection points up in the air or just in awkward spaces that we still drive a ton of ring shank, 20 penny, galvanized nails. And that's just not easy.
I don't know how you do it, brother.
One at a time.
What do you see are the biggest challenges for your business in the next few years and coming decades?
I'll be interested to see, what this pandemic shapes up to be. Are they going to bring prices back down? I mean, my job is the packages are so heavy on lumber. I mean, that's what my buildings mainly are, lumber with a steel skin, right? So when you're looking at percentages of jobs, lumber is a huge percentage. And I hope it doesn't, slow people down from doing what I get to do. But labor shortage obviously is a big thing. And I talked about me getting older, me not being able to do it as much, needing to maybe find a third guy anyway. That's tough. I mean, everybody will say the same thing, finding somebody that wants to work hard. And I wouldn't hire somebody that wasn't going to work hard. So that's going to be my biggest struggle probably is the labor side.
I hear that a lot, man.
Yeah. It's unfortunate.
What do you think the greatest misconception about post frame buildings is? I know what you're going to say, but go ahead.
Yeah, it's quality, man. People, I honestly, I think this is why we've been successful is that I used to be a custom home builder, right? At the end of my remodeling, I moved into custom homes and I like details. Post frame is nothing about details. Guys that are building post frames aren't conscious of details. They're conscious of time, efficiency, and putting up buildings. But I think the biggest misconception is that a post frame can't be a high quality building. It can't have good insulation values and be efficient because they're so big. I mean, that's the thing I hear all the time. Either A, it's going to cost $1 million to heat it, or B, the first windstorm is going to tear that building down. And I don't know if you guys knew this, but we had a Derico come through our area. Did you hear about that? It went to Iowa.
I only heard about it because of your videos, right? You were talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, 144 miles per hour was registered just a short 70 miles from my house. My area, we got about 80. Our building wasn't even done. It was, still being constructed, and nothing. We didn't incur any damage. They do blow away because people build poorly, but when done right, the diaphragm strength of a post frame is very strong, and the connection from post, the ground connection to the truss, is very, very strong. And that is the biggest misconception, is that a post frame is going to be weak, it's not going to last, and it's going to be expensive to heat.
So this is my favorite part of the show. Can you tell me about your own house? And is it a post frame?
It's not.
For a start, okay.
I wish it was. Maybe someday, yes.
How old is it? And is it in good repair? Do you ever work on it? Do you have any interest in working on it?
So, like I said before, I bought a house. And I only know it was around 1893 because a neighbor came by with a picture of the original lady that, the wife and her daughter. And it said 1893. The grass was up to their, waist, and they had their Sunday dresses on. Gorgeous house. But when I bought it, you couldn't even walk in the floors. It was so bad. And I don't think it'll ever be done. I've got a bathroom and a bedroom that are completely gutted. They've been spray foamed. The floor systems, are unlevel. So I've been trying to tweak it. I'm glad.
And you have little kids too, right?
I have 2 kids, which they have their bedrooms. It was a spare bedroom and bathroom that we kind of working around. But an old home is never going to be new again. It's just going to always need some sort of repairs, because I don't have that kind of money to just do it all, at once. So
who does, man?
Yeah. Hopefully they call me for a job.
Kyle, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I really mean it.
Thanks, man. I really enjoyed being on this.
So is there anything you want to tell or ask our listeners before we go?
I don't know about asking, because not sure if I'll get the answer to the question. But, I guess I would just say you've been talking about my YouTube channel, and I would, just say if you guys are interested in learning more about post frame, and maybe you were going to say this, but you can go check that out. It's RR Buildings. And just a simple search would probably turn you on to just about every social media platform I'm on. And I try to share everything, Patrick.
Your videos are very well done, man. So do you do that too? Like we should tell folks. And the production values are very good. You have a drone, you have good cameras, the shots are well composed. You're gifted.
Well, it's my nerdy outlet. So I got away from the computers, but I love computers. I just didn't like the atmosphere. So now I kind of get to do some techie stuff. I get to fly drones, operate cameras. And honestly, the best part, Patrick, is the amount of people that come back to me in the comments or send me messages or letters in the mail that say, and I just got one yesterday, the guy said, man, I've been working on leaving my corporate job because I've had a passion for building my whole life. I just didn't think I could do it. And you've motivated me to do it. And it's like, well, I hope it works out, because I don't want to be the guy that made you do that. That's awesome. We need more people to, follow that passion and not just think about maybe that instant money working in some big corporate job, because you can make a good living being a tradesman.
Amen. And satisfaction is everything, right? If you hate what you're doing, why do it?
Yep. Money's not everything.
Well, I'll tell folks they should work for Kyle.
Careful. I don't want to be a manager yet. I like what I do hands-on, so I don't want to have a big crew.
Well, depending on what happens in the publishing business in the future, buddy, I might be calling you about a job.
That'd be a commute.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. Thanks to Kyle for joining us. Thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Thanks very much for listening, and happy building.